The Adventures of Superman, Roads Not Taken, Part 1, The Sovereign. Metropolis, Florida, April. Well, it was a typical Friday. The Daily Planet was closing up as everybody was wrapping up and getting ready to leave the office. Clark Kent was covering up his computer as he was going to go on vacation. So far, it started right now. His shift was over. Well, he gets up, grabs his briefcase, and heads to the elevator. He was joined in the elevator by Anita, a very attractive young black woman who was the daughter of Philip Ward, the current owner of the Daily Planet. Anita replaced Lois Lane after Lois left for the Northwest to take a job opening out there for a Seattle newspaper. It was a very sad day in Clark's life, but all that ends well in his mind. He loved Lois still. That's all that mattered, even though Lois only loved one man and one man only, Superman. Well, Anita says to Clark, "So, you ready for your big vacation?" Clark says yes, 1 week of R&R. And I think I'm just gonna stay home, he says to Anita. Anita's like, "Really, Clark? You should travel. I think you really should." Clark says to her, "Well, Anita, I do enough traveling with this job, so I'm just going to stay home and relax, and then just wait for my big birthday on Friday, the 13th. Can't believe that? My birthday's on Friday the 13th this year. Ooh." Anita chuckled. "Yes, Clark, I can believe it." "Well, don't invite disaster," she says. "The last thing I need is for something bad to happen to you." Well, Clark says to Anita, "Well, Anita, don't worry, I always got my friend Superman to back me up." Anita was like, "Oh, him." Clark realized and knew that Anita did not like Superman. She always thought that Superman was just an overglorified vigilante, that nobody was able to see that. Clark says to Anita, "Well, I'm sorry you see it that way, Anita. He's done a lot for the city. He's done a lot for this planet over the years." Well, Anita stated her argument against Superman, but Clark was not going to get into this. He didn't have the time. He just wanted to go home and start vacation. Well, the two exited the elevator and walked out to the parking lot. Anita says, "Goodbye, Clark. Please stay out of trouble and stay safe, and maybe I'll see you during your vacation." Clark says, "Well, good night to you too, Anita, and please, you stay out of trouble, or else my friend Superman's going to have to help you." Anita's like, "Please, Clark, that's not funny." Clark let out a smile, like, "See you later, Anita." Well, as Clark was heading to his car, his text message went off. Clark looked at his smartphone and read the text message. It was from Professor Hamilton at Star Labs. It read, "Dear Clark, if you can, please get a hold of Superman. I have a major discovery that I want to show him. Thank you, Professor Hamilton." Well, Clark thought to himself, I have time. Let me see what Professor Hamilton has to show my alter ego. So Clark looked around and went behind his car. He changed into Superman and took off into the air. Well, Superman lands in Star Labs. He walks inside to the giant laboratory of Professor Hamilton, who turns around and says, "Ah, Superman, thank you, you've come." Well, Superman noticed out in the lab some huge device. It was giant, it was circular, like a mammoth MRI machine or CAT scan machine. Superman asked, "Professor Hamilton, what is this thing?" Professor Hamilton said with glee, like a child on Christmas, "Superman, it is one of my greatest inventions. What do you know about alternate dimensions or string theory?" Superman explained what he knew from what he read and studied, but like he says to Hamilton, "This is just the extent of my knowledge of alternate dimensions and string theory." Well, Hamilton says, "This machine is a culmination of 21 years of research and developing technology to do this. This machine is a dimensional gateway generator. It can open doors to alternate dimensions. You name it, it could probably take you there. An alternate timeline, an alternate anything. Superman had a concerned look on his face that the professor notices, like, that thing works? Asks Superman. Hamilton says, yes, it works. I've tried it so far. I sent a few little knickknacks through it, like a fruit, some screws, and I might send over a little probe. He points to the probe out in the far corner of the lab. It looked like a little NASA rover. And he says to Superman, this baby will bring me back data on what's on the other side. You never know. It could be an alternate Earth. Probably an Earth where you don't exist, Superman. Superman says, Professor Hamilton, I deeply admire you as a man of science, but I think this is a little too far. Well, I always support scientific endeavors, but I think this is a bit on the dangerous side, said Superman to the professor with great concern in his voice. Professor Hamilton says, listen, taking risk, it's what science is about. How much of every great discovery in the world of science has been made by taking big risks? This is going to be one of them, he says to Superman. Well, Superman says, I'm going to stay here, Professor, just in case something goes wrong. I could put a stop to it. Professor Hamilton, well, that's great. I need a witness. So Professor Hamilton runs to the control panel and starts hitting a bunch of buttons and switches. Well, the round structure of the portal begins making a weird noise, and a pattern of energy began whirling about inside the portal machine as it twirled and made weird noises. Well, Superman and Professor Hamilton stared in awe at the open gateway when all of a sudden a loud alarm sounded throughout the lab. Superman screams at the professor, Professor, what is that? Professor Hamilton looks at the control panel. The display screen shows that a gravity well was forming. He's like, oh god, there's gravity forming. Holy crap, it's going to start pulling everything in. The professor was struggling as he was hitting the emergency shut-off button, but the shut-off button was not working. He kept slamming the button, but the button was not working. All of a sudden, the gravity got so intense that it even pulled Superman inside. Well, Superman flew through the portal as he was going on a trip of terror to some place that was unknown, as he was flying down a corridor of colored energy lights flying by him, and it's some sort of tunnel. It was weird, it was trippy, it was scary, even for the Man of Steel. Well, the trip through this tunnel was short as a bright light flashed, and now he was outside. He was back in Metropolis, but it was not late afternoon. It was like maybe late morning. The birds were singing, people were walking on the streets, calm, happily, but he noticed something about this Metropolis. There were signs all over the place, signs with him on it, like some sort of propaganda poster, and what he was wearing in this poster was different. He was not wearing his blue and red attire. It was black, red, with some gold speckled on it. He wondered, where am I? What alternate world did I get sent to? All of a sudden, Superman heard tanks riding down the street. Now, Superman knew there was something wrong. Tanks going down the streets in downtown Metropolis, this is not normal. Propaganda posters with him on it like some sort of evil dictator. Then Superman noticed out in the distance a huge towering building. It was probably the tallest building he's seen in Metropolis. It's not in his Metropolis where he lives at. This building had to be at least a mile or more high, and it had very, very strange decorative patterns, like a mix of Earth and Kryptonian patterns. Suddenly he realized, oh no, it's a world where I'm an evil ruler. Well, he was right. As soon as his people saw him in the street, the people came around him and began bowing down to him, calling him sovereign. It's like, oh, mighty sovereign, you've come from your tower. You've come to look at us people. Oh, mighty sovereign. Superman was freaking out. It's like, people, I am not the sovereign. My name is Superman. Superman realized this is a world where he is a bad guy or some evil ruler. He was not liking this. Well, before he could fly off, suddenly he heard someone flying towards him and landing. As soon as the dust of the landing cleared, his alternate Earth self appeared. The one that was in the propaganda posters. They were mirror images of each other, except for this version of him had his suit all black. Instead of the yellow and red S shield on his chest, there was the traditional Kryptonian genetic marker design that all the Kryptonians on his home planet wore to identify their bloodline and lineage. Instead of bright red briefs and bright red cape, the briefs and the cape were almost dark blood red, muted. He had a gold cloth belt wrapped around instead of the yellow belt with the oval buckle, and his boots were also the same color red as the rest of the suit. He was a very ominous looking version of himself. The people on the streets were confused. It was like, wait a minute, there's two sovereigns? What's going on? Well, his alternate version, the Sovereign, spoke. Who are you? Superman says, I am you, from another timeline, an alternate timeline, where I didn't become some dictator ruling the earth. The people were shocked and aghast that were looking. It's like, there's another timeline where Sovereign is not a ruler? What is this timeline? What is this world like? Well, the Sovereign screamed at the people, silence! So, there's another timeline, another dimension, with another me, a me who's weak and cowardly, that didn't use his powers to conquer, to take what is his. Well, Superman responded back, I'm sorry, I had good parents to bring me up. I don't know who the hell brought you up, but you, I don't know, and I don't like you already, said Superman. Then the Sovereign responds back, the feeling is mutual, weakling. Suddenly, Superman heard something flying in. When he looked, several big robots landed. They were menacing looking, and they all stuck out their hands, and out of the palm of their hands an energy blast shot out, hitting Superman and overpowering him. Well, then Superman lost consciousness and collapsed to the ground. The Sovereign looks at his unconscious counterpart and said to the robots, you may leave now, resume your patrols. I'll take this person back to my palace. Well, the Sovereign grabs the unconscious Superman and flies off, taking his counterpart to his luxurious, towering palace out in the outskirts of Metropolis. Well, Superman regained consciousness. He was in pain. Whatever those robots blasted him with hurt. As he got up, he realized he was surrounded by a force field. He touched the force field and it shocked him. Superman pulls his hand back, violently shaking it from the pain of that shock. It's like, ow, God, what is this thing made of? Well, he heard a feminine voice speak to him as it was getting closer. It's made from the same technology that you, or should I say, the Sovereign brought from his home planet and fused it with our technology. Suddenly, Superman turns his head and sees a very beautiful but yet a very familiar figure walk towards him, wearing a long, flowing black dress with gold trimming around, very ornate, very decorative. Her hair done in a very bizarre style, but the striking blue eyes strike out. It was Lois Lane. Lois Lane was not a reporter in this world. She was something to the Sovereign. Superman asked her, "Who are you? Wait a minute. Lois, what happened to you?" She says to Superman, "Nothing. The Sovereign came into my life and showed me what a real man was. He made me his consort and made me his ambassador, his speaker to the people. I have achieved something that many women just envy in life. Being this close to the Sovereign and being his lover, being his servant, doing everything he commands on a whim." Superman said, "No, Lois, it's not you. The Lois I know was fierce, independent. She didn't take anything from anyone, man or woman. She was the one that always called the shots, and she was always the one that had to be in control. But this was a different Lois." That's what Superman was failing to realize. This was a Lois that got what she wanted in life, to have Superman, to be with Superman, and would do anything to keep Superman. Well, while that banter was going on, Superman trying to convince Lois that this is not the Lois that he knows, down on the streets, the people were talking about this other Sovereign, the one that calls himself Superman. They were wondering, two sovereigns, another dimension, a world where he's not a dictator. Well, in this world, Anita Ward is the leader of a rebel group that opposes the Sovereign and is looking for a way to overthrow him at any cost necessary. Well, she heard about this other Superman, this good counterpart of the Sovereign, who was defeated easily and taken by Sovereign. She says to one of her members of the group, "See, you can't even depend on a other Sovereign from another dimension. He got overpowered by his evil counterpart, and taken. You can't trust someone who's non-human," she says. "We have to end this now, and we're going to end this." One of the other guys in the group says, "But Anita, how are we going to end this?" She says, "There used to be a professor who opposed him in the early days when he was taken over, by the name of Professor Emil Hamilton. He theorized that maybe a piece of his irradiated homeworld could destroy him. Well, it was a theory that he could never put into practice. He did get his hands on the rock that came from his homeworld, Krypton," she says, and she pulls out a chest and opens up the chest, and there was a green light coming from the chest. She says, "It's the only way we're going to defeat him." Another guy in the meeting asked, "But what about the robotic Centurions that protect him and patrol everywhere?" She says, "I have that covered." She goes on to pull out a metal crate. She puts her fingerprint on the metal crate, and it begins scanning her fingerprint. Then the crate unlocks. Inside the crate were energy weapons. She goes on to explain, "These were built by Professor Hamilton before he died. These energy weapons will make short work of the robot Centurions. They could harm Sovereign, but they won't kill him. Only this can kill him." So she says, "Gentlemen, ladies, this is the final battle. Many of you won't make it. I know that. Maybe I won't make it either. But even if we all die, as long as we achieve victory and free the people of Earth, then our death, our sacrifice, won't be in vain. Who is with me on this final mission, on this possible suicide mission?" she says. Everybody in the room raised their hand. She says, "Thank you, my brothers and sisters in arms. We do this for freedom." Everybody screamed back, "We do this for freedom." Well, back at the Sovereign's palace, Superman was sitting on the ground, Indian style, when Lois was dismissed by a very familiar voice. It was Sovereign. He says, "My dear, leave me alone with this weakling. Me and him have a lot to talk about. Why don't you just attend to some other affairs you might want to attend to, like my birthday celebration for Friday?" She smiles and says, "Yes, my love," as she put her arms around him and started kissing him uncontrollably. He says to her, Hey, Lois, calm down. Come on, get to work." She smiles and runs off. She says, "Yes, my love." Superman was sickened by that sight. He's like, I thought I never could see myself go so low in life, but you are what I am if I chose the wrong path in life. Well, the Sovereign sat down, Indian style, mocking Superman. It's like, "So, tell me, weakling, tell me all about yourself. What is so different about you in this alternate universe that you come from?" Well, Superman explained pretty much what happened to him verbatim. How he grew up, how Jonathan and Martha Kent were good moral authority for him. Well, the Sovereign began telling his story, which pretty much deviated after he turned 18. He discovered who he was, decided he could use his powers and abilities to conquer, came to Metropolis, showed Lex Luthor the technology, and as Lex Luthor reverse engineered the Kryptonian technology and used it to create new and advanced technology that made his company huge, then the Sovereign made his move and took over, killing his best friend, as he said, Lex Luthor. Something that shocked Superman to hear. He didn't know what was more shocking, that he chose to use his power to conquer, or he chose to be best friends with Lex Luthor, then betray him. Either way, being best friends with Lex Luthor was still shocking in itself. Well, as the Sovereign began explaining more and more about how he conquered the world, suddenly one of his robot Centurions comes walking in with a very familiar woman in its arms. Then the robot proceeded to say,
"Lord Sovereign, this woman, identified as Anita Ward, leader of the Resistance, has surrendered to our custody outside at the entrance of the Great Palace."
Well, Superman saw the woman. It was the alternate Anita Ward. Well, she was the Resistance leader. Go figure. The robot had let her go. She was very passive in her behavior. She was wearing tight pants, a red leather jacket which was very long, a black beret, and round-rimmed glasses. The Sovereign came walking around her and he said, "So, Anita Ward, you finally came to your senses and decided to surrender to me." Anita says, "No, I'm not surrendering to you," she says. "I'm giving up my life to freeing the people of this planet by giving up my life in defeating you," she says to Sovereign. Sovereign says, "And how are you going to do that? You're unarmed. There's nothing that can hurt me." Well, Sovereign was about to learn the hard way. Anita says, "Yes, there's one thing that could hurt you, something you probably don't know about, but you're going to find out today." Well, Anita reached for her jacket and began unzipping her jacket. As she pulled the lapel of her jacket, the green glow of the kryptonite shined through and it began affecting Sovereign. Suddenly, the Sovereign began moaning in pain. Oh, what is that?" Anita said, "A little piece of your homeworld, you asshole. It's called kryptonite, the one thing that can defeat you." The Sovereign said, No, this can't be," as he began falling back, trying to get away from Anita as she just walked calmly towards the Sovereign with the glowing kryptonite. Superman gets up and sees that this version of Anita was the same as the Anita he knew in his world. Valiant, noble, self sacrificing, she lay her life down to save other people. And now she was doing that to defeat Sovereign. Superman knew he had to break free, and he was going to take the risk. He puts both of his hands on the force field and lets the energy of the force field course through his body as he writhed in pain. Well, Superman gets down onto one knee as he was badly weakened from the force field's energy coursing through him, but the force field was down. He was catching his breath. He could see from the corner of his eye that the Sovereign was curling on the ground. His skin was turning green as the kryptonite was slowly doing him in. But he could also see through the other corner of his eye that Lois had entered the room, and she was running after to attack Anita. Superman mustered what was left of his strength and ran and went to stop Lois, as he was able to easily subdue Lois because even though he didn't have his full super strength, he was still strong enough to subdue Lois. After doing a quick sleeper hold on Lois, he gently lays her down. He could see that Anita was getting closer and closer to the Sovereign. The Sovereign was weakened from the kryptonite and couldn't do nothing. Superman just stood back and looked as Anita was doing the job. Suddenly, his super hearing picks up a battle outside. Superman quickly ran out to the balcony, and he could see the Resistance were engaging the robot Centurions, and a massive battle between the robot Centurions of the Sovereign and the Resistance group, who were now in possession of advanced energy weapons that was making short work of the robot Centurions, but at the same time the robot Centurions were making short work of the Resistance fighter. Well, Superman turned back to look as Anita was kneeling down on one knee over the Sovereign. She says to the Sovereign, "It's over, you bastard. It's over. Your reign of terror is done." She goes to pull out a button from her jacket. It was a detonator button. She presses the button, and Superman could hear with his super hearing the bomb arming itself to blow up, followed by the massive explosion that destroyed the entire upper floor and flung Superman out the balcony. Well, Superman began falling towards the battle on the ground. He was still weakened by the force field's energy coursing through him. He didn't have enough strength to fly. As he was about to hit the ground, suddenly a bright flash of light and he was teleported away. Now, Superman was going through that tunnel of colored lights, wondering where in the heck he's going now. He survived the nightmares of one alternate world. Where is he being taken to now? So, as he flew down the corridor of lights, suddenly there was a bright flash of light, and he emerged into another alternate Earth. He lands on the sand and dirt really hard. Well, Superman lets out a moan. Ugh. He gets up, dusts himself off. He looked. He was what looked like in the middle of a desert. But when he looked to his surroundings, he realized he was not in the desert. He recognized several of the bridges and several of the landmarks of Metropolis now destroyed. He was in the middle of the river, or where the river would be at. Now it was completely dried up. And there was a huge burnt symbol on the ground. It was the Omega symbol. and he saw the air littered with parademons flying all around. He realized where he was. He was in an alternate Earth where Darkseid took over. Superman lets out a loud scream, "No!" as he fell on his knees and looked at the destruction around him. Like and subscribe, and stay tuned for Superman Roads Not Taken Part 2.